Okay, good afternoon at the time that I'm recording this on a lovely Wednesday evening. Okay, so we're going to go through the past papers and we're going to go through explanations for multiple choice questions. My idea is that hopefully if I can record this and go through the papers, then I'll get less individual questions from all of you guys next year. And hopefully this will help out you guys that are preparing for your IGCSE economics test. So we're going to start with 2023 and we're going to go through question paper 11 first, systematically through the multiple choice questions. Okay, so first question is our basic economic problem. It's asking us about the consequences, so the negative effects of scarce resources. Okay. So if we go through this systematically, what we'll do is we'll identify the correct answer first, and then we'll go through the incorrect answers. So the basic economic problem, the correct answer here would be D. That is where wants will exceed productive capacity. So our basic economic problem is that we have unlimited wants and limited resources. So if we knew that, we would be able to answer this question correctly. Production will cause external costs. That is true, but it is not a consequence of the resources being scarce. That is a consequence of how resources are allocated, which is something that we look at further on in the paper and in the studies. Relative poverty will gradually increase. Again, that is something that could possibly happen, but it is not a consequence of the basic economic problem. And sustainable development will take place. That is, again, something that could happen, but it is more so a possible consequence of economic growth rather than scarce resources. So unlimited wants, limited resources equals choices have to be made, equals opportunity costs. That is our basic economic problem. Okay, so the second one, the diagram shows the production possibility curve for an economy producing consumer goods and capital goods. So we've got our consumer goods here on the vertical axis, and we have our capital goods on the horizontal axis. The economy is producing OM, consumer goods. First thing we should do is we should go to that, we should mark it in. So they'll always start from the origin point, O to M. That means that we're currently, or we start producing at this point, and OG, capital goods. Okay, so we can see there, OG and OM, that is our correct point for where we're starting. What is the opportunity cost of this decision in terms of consumer goods for moving to OH? So we go to OH here again. Okay, and we can see that we've moved from M, if I can get my arrow correctly here, to H, right? Okay, so the opportunity cost is the next best alternative that is given up when a decision is made. And when we talk about opportunity cost with a PPC, we're talking about essentially what we've given up. So we used to be making this amount of consumer goods, and we are now making more capital goods instead. So what have we given up is we've given up this area in here, right? So we have essentially given up ML. M to L is the area for the amount of consumer goods that we are now no longer producing, because we were producing M and we are now producing L, so we're producing this much less, right? So basically any point that we move here, the area in between those 2 points will be the opportunity cost. So J to G, that is not an opportunity cost because J is more than we're currently producing and G is what we were producing previously. M to N. So M to N, again, N is less than we were producing, and N to L, again, less than we were producing, right? So those areas don't cover the point that we were to the point that we are, therefore those are not relevant. So another opportunity cost question: a hospital has spent all of its budget allocated for employing doctors. What is the opportunity cost to the hospital of employing an extra doctor? So one thing we need to be aware of generally with the opportunity cost questions is normally an opportunity cost will be a negative consequence of the decision that has been made. And that will be a negative consequence in terms of what was given up. So in this case, the correct answer is, by employing an extra doctor, we are reducing the number of nurses employed, right? Because we're not able to employ the same amount of nurses if we have to employ extra doctors, because obviously our budget is limited. An improvement in the recovery rate of patients, that is not a negative consequence, it's a positive effect of the decision that has been made, right? Therefore, it's not an opportunity cost because it's not something that we have to give up. An increase in the number of patients treated is also a positive effect of the decision that has been made. It's not an opportunity cost because it is not a negative consequence of the decision that has been made. And the salary paid to the extra doctor, again, is not an opportunity cost. It is a consequence of the decision. It is not an opposite effect of the decision that has been made. So anything that's relating to a doctor can't be an opportunity cost because it's a consequence of the decision. It is not something that has been given up. Okay, question 4. There's been an increase in the demand for wheat. This has led to an increase in the demand for labour to harvest the wheat. Which brand of economics covers these two concepts? Okay, so macro and microeconomics. Macroeconomics, a very simple way to remember it is that it covers, or broadly it covers, the whole economy. Micro is the study and behaviour of individuals, firms and households, right? So an increase in the demand for wheat and an increase in the demand for labour to harvest wheat, they are not things that will affect the whole economy. They will only affect those particular industries, right? So the demand for labour to harvest wheat will only affect wheat and maybe or possibly another industry that is directly affected by wheat. But it will not affect everybody in the country or everybody in the economy. So they would both be microeconomic concepts. An example of any of the options that have macro concepts would be inflation rate, supply side policies, monetary policy, fiscal policy, etc., aggregate demand or aggregate supply. But these would be affecting individual demand, which would be micro concepts. Okay, so question 5. In the United Kingdom, the price of timber used in house building increased. This was because of a boom in the UK house building industry and a shortage of drivers to deliver the timber. What happened to the UK market for timber to cause this price increase? Okay, so normally we go through two different changes here. They're asking us about demand and they're asking us about supply, and we have to identify which direction they have shifted. Okay, so the price used in house building has increased. This was because of a boom in the UK house building industry and a shortage of drivers to deliver the timber. So we take it step by step. We take the first part first. So the UK house building industry has experienced a boom. How will that affect the market for timber? Well, timber will be used in the production of houses. So the demand curve for timber will go right. It will increase. If we're building more houses, we need more timber. And there's a shortage of drivers to deliver the timber. So the supply curve would go left, because even though we're demanding more, we are supplying less. Okay, what does a supply curve show? So, students in my class will probably have seen me do this before. What does the supply curve show? Well, it shows the quantity supplied, obviously, but it also shows the following. I describe it as plus plus minus minus, which is the relationship between quantity supplied and price. And plus plus minus minus is another way to say a positive relationship. Okay, the demand curve shows an inverse relationship. A global pandemic causes the demand for air travel to decrease. What value for the price elasticity of supply of air travel will cause the number of tickets for air travel to fall by the most? Okay, so will cause the number of tickets for air travel to fall by the most. So the demand for air travel has decreased. Which value of PES will cause the number of air tickets for air travel to fall the most? So if we have 0 for our PES, then we would have perfectly inelastic, so the quantity would not change. The quantity therefore that will change will be the one that has the biggest elasticity, and that would be 1.5. So because this one is sensitive, when the demand for the air travel decreases, that because the sensitivity is higher with the elasticity being higher, the number of tickets for air travel will fall by the most when we're at an elastic level of supply. Right? So tricky enough question. If we have a PES of 0, the quantity will not change at all. If it's 0.5, it will change by half the amount that the demand has decreased by. 1 will change by the same amount, but 1.5 will change by a greater amount than the demand for air travel decreasing. So that would mean that we would have the largest fall in air travel for number of tickets. Okay, what is a disadvantage of a market economy? So, not enough competition. Well, that's not true. Market economy creates competition. We can have a monopoly that exists, but it's not a general disadvantage unless a monopoly is stressed. State intervention is definitely not a disadvantage because it doesn't really happen. No consumer choice is again not a disadvantage because it doesn't really happen. So the only option to select is not enough merit goods. Market economy, merit goods undersupplied, underconsumed. Demerit goods oversupplied and overconsumed. Question 9. Droughts in some countries caused the supply of wheat to fall. Wheat prices then rose, providing an opportunity for wheat producers in other countries to increase their supply. Why might the price of wheat continue to be high in the year following the drought? Okay, so our correct answer here will be B, and why. If we have had wheat prices that go up, right, and then they've had the opportunity to increase their supply, the price of wheat continuing to be high in the year following the drought would only happen because suppliers unaffected by the drought fail to increase their output. So, if they are unable to increase that output, the price will remain high. If they are able to increase their output, then we would have a reduction in the price. Because what we would have is, if I just show this quickly, we would have a supply curve which would shift to the right. Okay, but that doesn't happen, so we remain somewhere up here, right? Different weather conditions allowed a bumper harvest. Well, what that would do again is that would increase or shift the supply to the right, but we know that hasn't happened because if that happened, the price would drop the price would go here to P1 instead of being at the original price of P, but we know that the price has remained at P because they have told us. Government introduced a subsidy to wheat producers. That would also shift supply to the right, which again we know hasn't happened. And the wheat market returned to its original equilibrium. We would have started here at P1, and then the drought would have caused the supply curve to shift left. So returning to the original equilibrium would mean that we would have to have an increase in the supply or a shift to the right. And again, we know that that hasn't happened. So what we would do here is we would just mark it in by going supply right, supply right, supply right, and supply unchanged for B. So process of elimination should help you to figure it out. You figure out this question by identifying that the price has to remain high. So we've had a shift to the left when we have the drought, this way up to this point from P1, and we don't shift back. Okay, newly built houses tend to be inelastic in supply. Government aim is to make the supply more elastic by relaxing business regulations. Why is the government not likely to achieve this aim immediately? Okay, so one of the things that this question is asking you to understand basically is the determinants of PES, right? Some of those reasons are the time period, are the ease/feasibility of storage, etc. And you can go back to look at all those different reasons for PES. There's only 2 or 3 in total. So banks will lend or will only lend to high income earners. Well, that has nothing to do with the supply of houses, right? Newly built houses tend to be inelastic in supply. A government aim is to make the supply more elastic. So the demand for loans for houses will not be affecting that. The cost of building materials fluctuate according to the season. That might possibly affect it, but it's not why the government is not likely to achieve the aim. The aim is relating to the determinants of PES, and if you know them, you should be able to correct or find the correct answer, which is that houses take a long period of time to be built, right? Because they take a long period of time, that is why they are inelastic in supply. So if they relax building regulations, sure, we might have a lot of new entrants into the industry, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be able to build those houses any quicker than the existing suppliers were already building them. Okay, person planning for old age saves in the form of money rather than goods. What function does money perform when this is done? Okay, so this is very simple. We're not going to spend too long on this. If you know your functions of money, you just need to review them. This would be the store of value, because they're saving money, which is the store of value. That's the function that money provides. Unit of account, standard of deferred payment, and medium of exchange are other functions, but they're not relevant to this question, so please review over those. What is not normally a function of a central bank in a country? Okay. Do they act as a lender of last resort? Yes, they do. They act as a lender of last resort to commercial banks. Do they issue notes and coins? Yes, they do. They control the money supply. And do they operate the government monetary policy? Yes, they do, because they change the interest rates, as an example in here. Right? Interest rates and the money supply. Those two policies start with the central bank and finish with the commercial banks. They do not set the government budget. That is done by the government, obviously. What is a trade union most likely to protect? Okay, so trade unions, again, this is a very simple question. They're definitely not going to protect the profit of a firm, because they try and take the profit of a firm and they try and give it to these guys, the workers. Trade union is set up to protect the rights of a group of workers. They're trying to get them better wages, better working conditions, etc. The satisfaction of consumers has no interest to a trade union, and the social welfare of everybody, that also does not affect a trade union. The trade union only cares about the social welfare of the group of workers that they are representing. Person sets up a street food stall. What is necessary for the food stall to survive in the long run? Okay, so if you think about it this way, most businesses that start over a short period of time, they can survive if they're not profitable. However, over a long period of time, you have to be profitable in order to survive. Otherwise, you will run out of money and your business will not be able to survive. Do you have to grow? No, you don't. Because some businesses are able to survive for long periods of time while still remaining small businesses. Maybe they operate in a niche market which makes it very difficult or almost impossible to grow, right? So the market may be very small. The owner may decide to keep the business small, but they need profit. So do they need to grow? No. But do they need to have profit in the long run? Absolutely. A large privately owned firm is the sole supplier of electricity to a city. What combination of characteristics is likely to exist for this firm? Okay, so the first thing here is that a large privately owned firm is the sole supplier. What does that tell us? The fact that they're the sole supplier tells us that they are a monopoly, right? And if we know our characteristics of a monopoly, we know that the barriers to entry have to be high, right? We know that the long run profit would have to be high because they're the only sole supplier, so for them to exist in the long run they'll have to be making high profits. And as pricing decisions, they will be the price maker, not the taker. Because they're the sole supplier, they get to choose what price is set in that market. Be a price taker if it's a competitive industry, for example. So barriers of entry for monopolies, again, you can look over this. They're high barriers to entry. They can make supernormal profits in the short run and high profits in the long run. And they're price makers because they set the prices themselves, because they've got no competition. Okay, so when a firm produces 200 units, its variable cost is $600 and its total fixed cost is $2,000. What is the average cost at this output? Okay, first of all, we've got to find our total cost, and then when we get our total cost, we divide our total cost by our total output to get our average cost. So total cost will be 600 plus 2,000, which should give us 2,600. 2,600 divided by 200 should give us $13 as our average cost. Okay. Question 17. The government of country Z announces a forecast budget deficit of $234 billion as part of its fiscal policy. What is the effect of this forecast budget deficit likely to be? Okay, so the first thing we have to know in order to answer this question is what a budget deficit is, right? So a budget deficit, if I can spell it correctly, is where government spending or government expenditure is higher than government revenue. So we're spending more money than we are collecting in taxes, right? And then we've got to think about what our effect on AD will be for that. Okay? Government spending is a component of AD, and AD, if government spending goes up, will move to the right. So our components of AD, C plus I, that's a 1, sorry, C plus I plus G plus bracket net exports X minus M. Okay, so if AD moves to the right, which we know it will, that will result in an increase in output, an increase in employment, and an increase in national income as AD shifts to the right. And we should all know that by this stage. A decrease in economic growth, that would be AD moving left. So the forecast of this budget, AD would go left here. A decrease in inflation, again, that's AD going left. An increase in employment is the only one where AD will go right. And an increase in unemployment would be AD going left. Question 18. Low income groups do not pay income tax, so they don't pay income tax, but they are able to use state provided healthcare services. What does this illustrate? Okay. Does it illustrate monetary policy? No, because monetary policy is only the use of the following tools. So monetary policy is interest rates, and monetary policy is affecting AD. Interest rates, exchange rates, money supply, etc. Right? Does it show the effects of privatization? No. That is where companies move from the state provided services to private services, but that is not happening. Does it show redistribution of income? Yes, it does. Why? Because they're not paying income tax, but they are able to use the state-provided healthcare services, which would be paid for from the income tax paid by high-income groups. So it shows that low-income groups are able to benefit from high-income groups paying their taxes. Therefore, it is redistributing the income. And it is not regressive taxation because they're not paying any tax. Regressive tax they would still pay, but they would just pay less as they become higher earners and more as they become lower earners. But that's not happening in this case. Okay, government uses monetary policy and... Government uses monetary policy and reduces the interest rate. Okay, first thing you need to consider here, if they're reducing the interest rate, what are they doing? They're using expansionary monetary policy. What does that mean? That means that AD goes to the right. Okay, so what would be the consequence of this? A decrease in the rate of inflation? Definitely not. Why? Because that would be AD moving left. An increase in the level of investment? Yes, that could possibly be an increase, because that might result from AD moving right. An increase in the level of savings? No. And an increase in unemployment? Both of those will be from AD moving left. So the only one that applies here is B. AD moving right. Generally these questions are easy because we just identify which direction they move. Okay, what is the likely objective of supply side policy? So promoting the public sector? Definitely not. One of the policies of supply side policy is privatization, which is moving from the public sector to the private sector. So we would definitely not promote public sector for supply side. Increasing the power of trade unions, that is again the opposite of what we try and do. Trade union reforms are built around decreasing their power. Increasing direct taxation, no. So tax can be a supply side and a fiscal policy, but in this case that would not help us to increase our aggregate supply. A likely objective is to improve the productive potential, which is to shift AS to the right. And under no circumstances, these are all different tools, B, C, and D, that would be used, for example, but opposite tools in this case, would they shift AS to the right. Improving the productive potential is what, or the reason why AS will shift right. Okay, so an increase in which economic indicator best describes economic growth? So economic growth, how do we describe it? We describe it by using real GDP, which is our level of output. Living standards does not describe economic growth. Level of consumption does not describe economic growth, and general price level also don't. It is all relating to level of output. In other words, real GDP, which goes on your horizontal axis on your AD and AS diagram. Okay, what is full employment considered to be? Full employment is considered to be no seasonal unemployment, no private sector, no frictional, or no cyclical. It is considered to be no cyclical because cyclical is resulting from a change in AD. Frictional unemployment will always happen. Seasonal unemployment will always happen to a small extent, and private sector unemployment will also always happen to a small extent as well. Full employment is where we're at the maximum level that we can be. Doesn't mean that we are at 0%. Frictional may happen as people move from jobs to jobs, or you get people like actors, etc., who are waiting for long periods between jobs, technically unemployed. Seasonal unemployment will also happen in tourist industries, etc. But cyclical is relating to a decrease or a shift to the left in AD, which would mean that we would not be at full unemployment because it would be affecting the whole economy, not just a set of individuals. Okay, which group is most likely to benefit during a period of rapid inflation? Would it be exporters, pensioners, people with debts, or savers? Okay, so during rapid inflation, savers will not benefit, right? They will have their sad face on because the value of their savings will reduce day by day. People with debts, however, will be benefiting because they may be paying back less in real terms, right? Pensioners and exporters. Give me one sec here. If you just bear with me while I charge my laptop. So pensioners and exporters, they will not benefit from inflation either. Inflation is likely to reduce the exports because it increases the price of them, so definitely won't benefit them. And pensioners, they're also unlikely to benefit from it. Their pensions may be index linked, but it also is possible that they won't be index linked. So they may be kept up with inflation, or they may be losing the value of their pensions to inflation. Okay, the components of the HDI. Again, you can just review this. This is easy. I'm not going to go through it in too much detail. It's life expectancy at birth, expected years of schooling, and GNI per head. The per head bit is important because we have to calculate the national income for each person on average in a country. Otherwise, the countries with the largest populations will always look like they have the highest income if we don't calculate it per head. Okay, what situation must produce an aging population? So, to have an aging population, you would have to have a falling birth rate and a falling debt rate, right? So if the debt rate is going down, there is less people dying in a country, and if the birth rate is going down, and there is less people being born. So if we have less people being born and people living for longer, we would have an aging population. In B, if we have more people being born and more people dying earlier, then that will not have an aging population. A rising marriage rate and a falling debt rate, so you got more people getting married and less people dying. People may be getting older, yeah, for sure, but we have no information about the birth rate. We could have a very high birth rate in that country too. And a falling marriage rate and rising debt rate again doesn't give us a full set of information about an aging population. It just gives us information about the marriage rates, which doesn't tell us anything about the ages. So that's why C and D are wrong. Okay, question 26, we're nearly there. The table shows the unemployment rate in 3 developed economies in 1 year. What is the main causes of high rates of unemployment in developed economies in periods of recession? So the main causes of high rates of unemployment in developed economies during periods of recession. Okay, so the answer is decreases in total demand. Okay, now what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is AD moving to the left, which is cyclical unemployment. Now what's our key? Our key is that we know cyclical unemployment, so I'll just say sick unemploy here, is caused by a shift or a decrease in AD left, in other words a recession, which is in the question. So if we know the causes of the different types of unemployment, we would know that cyclical is caused by a recession, therefore decreases in total demand will be something that would cause that. The other points here, so regional inequalities of wealth, reduced levels of technological change, or the movement of labour, they may for different scenarios cause different types of unemployment, but not cyclical. Right? They may cause our structural, our frictional, or temporal unemployment, etc., but not cyclical, which is what the question is asking us, because they have recession in the question. Okay, what is most likely to result? So these questions are always difficult, because normally when it's most likely, they're giving you 2 scenarios that can happen or will happen, and you have to decide which one is most likely to happen. From an extension of specialization in manufacturing. So, cross out the bottom 2 first. For the producer, there will be less efficiency. That is not true. That's false. There will be more efficiency. For the employee, the work will become varied. That is also false. The work will become repetitive or boring if they're doing the same thing every day, all day. There will be less dependency on international trade. Okay, so this is one of the scenarios that could happen, and the consumer's prices would be reduced. This is another scenario that could happen. Now, the correct answer is A, because the prices reducing for the consumer are more likely to happen than the country having less dependency on international trade. So, if we specialize, we may be able to make more goods and services in our own country or increase our productive potential, meaning that we import less from other countries, right? However, it is also possible that by making more goods and services in our own country, we still need to import because we might not have access to the raw materials that are needed to make certain goods or services. So we may still need to depend on international trade. It depends about the types of goods and services that we're talking about. But the prices for the consumer will be reduced because specialization will reduce the cost of production. So that one is most likely to happen. The less dependency on international trade could happen, but it also could not happen if we need access to different raw materials that have to be imported. Okay, a country imposes a tariff on an imported product. What is the effect of this change? The price of the product increases and the quantity of the product imported is fixed. So, a tariff is a tax that they place on a product. It increases the price because it shifts the supply to the left. If supply shifts to the left, the quantity of the product imported is fixed, definitely not, and the price of the product will increase. So if you draw a demand and a supply diagram here, and you shift your supply to the left, so just say very quickly this is S1 and this is S, you see that the supply decreases and the price of the product increases. Okay, last two questions. The world demand for oil is price inelastic and oil is paid for in US dollars. If the price of oil falls rapidly, how might it affect the US dollar? Okay, so you need to revise your exchange rates for this question. However, if the demand for oil, if the price of oil goes down, right, and oil is paid for in US dollars, there will be less demand for US dollars. And if there is less demand, then that means that the exchange rate will depreciate. Okay, so C is the correct answer. And what benefit do multinational companies bring to their home country? The key here is the home country. Higher wages, increased employment, and more investment. They are all benefits that multinational companies bring, but they are all benefits that they bring to the host country, not the home country. The home country is the country that the multinational is from, and what they do is they send their profits back to their home country from their host country. Okay? Thank you and goodbye.